Welcome to MOTS, where we'll be applying the Manzer or Mosley Thurlow scale of quantitative analysis of pop culture narrative through a binary system.
Or MOTS! This podcast contains spoilers, mature content, and language. Viewer discretion advised.
Welcome back to MOTS. We have just seen the new Bond film, Spectre, and we were discussing it. I, of course, am Scott Thurlow, as always. Tonight I am joined by Stephen Mosley.
Hello.
Sir Jonathan Ian Manzer.
Neither shaken nor stirred by this movie.
Exactly. I think that's a good synopsis. So does anyone want to give another synopsis?
If you're going to make a James Bond drink, this one is one part Sean Connery, one part Timothy Dalton with a little sprinkling of Roger Moore.
Roger Moore's the olives in this martini.
Yes.
Indeed. Should we give a synopsis of the movie overall? Pretty much this starts off with James Bond finding a ring on a man who is soon thereafter kicked out of a helicopter. Right, after single-handedly fighting a helicopter. He then chases a lead down that starts with the death of the guy who he kicks out the helicopter and ends with him having sex with the guy who he kicked out the helicopter's wife. And then
It's phrased oddly for a moment.
Indeed.
Go on.
Which leads him to this shadowy agency that apparently just sells women and drugs all over the world.
They're committing
He infiltrates Eyes Wide Shut.
Right, pretty much. And then turns out that Christoph Waltz is the biggest bad guy in the whole world, and Bond has to fight him, which he then does.
And slowly he becomes Blofeld.
Right?
Yeah. Well, no, I don't know if it's slowly. So he's like, "Hey, now I'm Blofeld."
No, he gets the
Yeah, no, I get it.
It reminded me quite a bit of Star Trek Into Darkness, where they had Khan as the villain, but they didn't tell you he was Khan until about halfway through.
But it was kind of obvious, sort of.
Yes.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, that's pretty much it for the movie. I mean,
that's what happened in Spectre. We can say that. So, given that, Steve, I want you to start us off the intro to Spectre.
All right. Well, it starts off with in Mexico for Dia de los Muertos.
Yes, my favorite holiday, of course.
Which is actually a pretty cool scene of the parade that's going on there. Bond.
May I interrupt for that for a second?
Yeah.
Because I was really impressed by the single shot for, the first 10, 15 minutes of the film.
Yeah.
Which was done spectacularly, showing... And the cinematography in the introduction was spectacular.
I completely agree.
Same here.
Might I also add that Bond's...
his suit was excellent. Yes.
Was pretty excellent as well.
Of course.
With the bones on the tie.
Listen, Bond's always going to look good no matter what, even if he's Dia de los Muertos.
But apparently he seduces a woman just to get into her hotel room so he can sneak out onto the roof and assassinate people. At which point he has some kind of listening device. He overhears a conversation about
a radio gun.
Pale King, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And as he shoots these two people, apparently causes the entire building to explode, which was a little bit unclear. Does he shoot a bomb, I guess, or was that always set to explode?
No, I believe it was the explosions that they were going to be using on a stadium that they were planning to destroy.
And he hits the suitcase that they were in or something?
I
think it's clear enough that it's something like that. Yeah. I got that out of it.
All right. So the rest of the intro is him chasing down this target that he was there to assassinate in the first place. And as he's walking down the road, the target eventually... I forget what the guy's name is. It starts with an S.
It reminded me of Scaramanga, but it's not
it wasn't
that,
exactly that. But it's something like that.
Scalia?
And
not that either, but it's close.
Justice,
yeah. You want to call it that for the rest of the cast, you sure you can. Go on.
He ends up trying to get away in a helicopter, which Bond jumps into, and then they have a ridiculous helicopter fight for about 10 minutes.
In a sense, yes, but it's a Roger Moore Bond fight. Yeah. And it's to the point where, and I'm going to jump in here with a kind of analysis now, that one of the issues I had with this movie, and perhaps Skyfall as well, but I'm going to focus mainly on this one, is that there's weird tonal shifts throughout this, where they have Daniel Craig as this very serious
brooding Bond,
who's kind of psychopathic. It's not like he's seducing women because he's a horny spy. It's that it's always for using them for another. And the thing is, if you're taking the Bond character and focusing on one aspect of it, they focus on the fact that he's kind of a psychopathic loner spy with the Daniel Craig.
That's definitely true.
Then when they try to add these elements which are over the top, it conflicts with the tone of the rest of the movie and how I understand that he's looking to take down this helicopter, but because doing like aerial somersaults in the air, it seems strange and out of place almost.
I see what you mean. You're saying, if I may rephrase it, something like the characterization that they put onto Bond in this is at odds with some of the things that he does. But the thing is, I took it that intro is like a classic Bond intro. But that's all it is. Every Bond movie opens with something like that. Yeah. So I get what you mean. Like,
no, it's like taking Timothy Dalton and inserting him with the plot and actions of a Roger Moore.
They cut and pasted him in.
It's like having Timothy Dalton dressed as a clown to infiltrate this, and then but that's not who Timothy Dalton is. So,
I get it. Like, it sort of goes back to your humorous synopsis of the intro. But I see what you mean again, but it didn't bother me in that sense. While it was like there, contained, I didn't feel it was as jarring. But I see you that it did exist for sure.
I felt it was and like people were, I think, snickering. I know you were, Steve-O, because you were sitting next to me at this entire scene. So I don't know. I felt that it broke me out of it.
Like I said, like I'm going to say this about to the next question, jump the gun a little bit, but this movie was like a by the books coloring, like paint by numbers Bond movie. Yeah. Nothing stood out about it. So the intro, it was over the top, but in a way that almost all the intros are ever.
I would like to mention that the standard Bond opening of him walking in and turning and shooting the camera is always awesome and like.
Sure, but that's in every Bond movie. It's not quite
that's what I was going to say. It always gets me into a Bond movie. So, like, as the first thing that you always see in a Bond movie, I'm always excited to watch it, regardless of whether it turns out to be good or bad.
All right. So you're saying that shot saved the film?
No, of course not. But also, the song intro that they do in every Bond film, I thought was pretty well done for this one. But I usually like those. I think you said the same thing earlier, Ian.
Like, I want to give you an example of the kind of humorous, over-the-top thing in the introduction that I thought worked well with the tone of the film. Because they have kind of like this dark humor, and I think it works best when they're focusing on that. There's a part where because the bomb goes off, the building that James Bond is on is collapsing under him. So he's trying to like slide and like go down this. I mean, it's not as over the top as other Bonds might make it, but it's kind of a very kind of realistic way. He grabs hold of, I think, a candelabra on the wall, and it just pulls out. He falls and lands on a couch. Yeah. And that was totally believable. The tongue in cheek, but it was believable for the character. It was a laugh that I was willing to accept for the tone of the movie was going.
And it's always, I've noticed with Daniel Craig, he has a thing with like tossing things away. Like he did the same thing with the candelabra or whatever the hell it is. I guess
the goblet or whatever. Yeah.
The sconce that was on the wall that pulled out. He lands on the couch, and then like looks around, realizes he's not going to die anymore.
Chucked it away.
Just tosses the thing to the side, gets up, and like walks out and continues on his hunt.
This speaks to something we said in other casts about like the Harrison Ford effect, if you will. But because like he's playing, it's Bond, so it's a Bond move. It's a sort of a Daniel Bond move, if you will. It's both of them at once. He's both the character and not, but like it's a total natural thing. But I was going to say that escape when the building was crumbling. That to me, I described it as a Assassin's Creed, like a set piece escape move.
Well, that was
in a Bond movie.
The one thing I remember I don't remember much of Quantum of Solace, but I remember the opening of that, and that's 100% Assassin's Creed, like that, right? That's the whole thing. Where he's like running up the scaffolding, chasing the guy, and like,
maybe
was it that one or what?
Yeah, was it the parkour bomber?
Yeah.
I believe that was.
Oh yeah.
And that was actually an incredibly good opening.
That was an amazing opening scene.
You guys read about that, but that's Skyfall or whatever, or Quantum, not this.
Yeah.
So, anything else about the
but it kind of like that specific part where the building's crumbling kind of reminded me of that.
Yeah.
This is my big problem with it, is that I loved 75% of the opening, and I absolutely hated 25%. I was actually thinking that I might give this a 0 because of the helicopter scene bothered me that much. But I don't know yet. I don't think that it lasted. I thought I was re-engaged with the movie later.
Right.
And I don't know, do you guys think I should... It didn't break me. It broke me, but it didn't break me for the entire length of the movie.
I guess, but this is probably sometimes faced as well. And I would say, to answer that, you just gave me the number, 75-25. So if it's overall you liked it more than not, then I think you give it credit on that.
I don't know.
And I somewhat disagree, like, to the extent that I didn't... Again, I see your point, but it didn't jar me as much.
I was going to say pretty much the same thing as you, Scott. I didn't mind the helicopter part. I see exactly what you're saying, Ian, about it. And it was just over the top. And we had a little discussion about this after the film, about how it kind of seemed more like he just had a death wish when he was in the helicopter. And like...
Well, I feel like, Scott, to bring that conversation, you had mentioned Bond always kind of has that kind of death wish.
It was a standard thing to me.
Daniel Craig almost killed a lot of people in that scene. And I feel that like a Pierce Brosnan Bond would have diverted that helicopter away from the crowd, where Daniel Craig's Bond was more focused on... He
did eventually, but I see what you mean. It's
no, he just pulled it up at the last second because he didn't want to crash in the fucking ground. Yeah. But like,
he was more concerned getting his job done than he was for collateral damage, which I respect as a character. But again, you're taking that kind of concept and that morality and putting it to wacky aerial stunts.
I get it. So anyone else have anything else to add to the intro? Do you know what we're going to give it?
I think I'm going to give it a 1.
I think that last thing brought me to the 0.
Fair enough. I'll give it a 1, but perhaps you convinced me a bit. That's a softer one, but overall, like I said, I still liked it well enough, and it's a standard Bond opening. While it may have been a bit ridiculous, you expect that. Like, I guess I want to say, like, you expect that out of a Bond film, and so therefore I accepted it in the Bond film. All right, let's move on to the body of Spectre. Ian.
Thank you. This is going to be a complicated one. There's an A plot and a B plot.
Yes.
So I'm going to cover the B plot quickly. So MI6 has been merged with another like intelligence agency, but basically at the NSA for Britain.
More or less.
And they're trying to phase out the 007 program, saying that, like drones and like hacking people's computers are more effective nowadays than having a lone agent. I've seen this plot before in multiple action movie. I think Die Hard 4 was it like had that kind of concept too. And they slowly find out that the guy who heads the NSA, the British NSA, was working for Spectre, and they're going to use this grouping of all these countries together, pooling their information as kind of like a weapon to conquer the world, I guess, or something like that. Some vague.
That's what always the evil organizations in Bond films want to do. But yeah.
So M, who is now Ralph Fiennes after Skyfall, is kind of a weak. Like he's still getting into the leadership role and under a lot of pressure from being merged with this other organization, and he's slowly finding himself being kind of pushed out. Basically, he cuts off James Bond, and he slowly gets Q, Moneypenny together, and then eventually they
form their own rogue, scrappy team, of course.
Yeah. Again, you've seen this plot before. And the A plot in Holly and James Bond is that James Bond has been given a last mission by the now deceased Judi Dench M.
Mission from beyond the grave, if you will.
To go hunt down this Spectre organization, but no one knows what it is yet. He finds the ring that leads him to psychologically abuse an Italian widow, have sex with her, and then
he's using women again to get further his job.
He infiltrates
classic Bond move.
Spectre, which is incredibly eyes wide shut style. There he gets introduced to Blofeld, even though and Blofeld recognizes him, and they actually recognize each other. And you find out later that when James Bond's parents died when he was young, he was adopted, I suppose, by this family, and this was his older brother who was jealous of him taking.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing's a worldwide chase as they're hunting down various people from other Bond, the Daniel Craig Bond movies, and they
connecting them to it.
Yeah, they end up at, if any of you have played New Vegas DLC, Old World Blues, they end up in Big Mountain,
yes.
Basically.
It might as well be. You pointed it out to me, and I was like, I didn't think about it, but you're absolutely right.
A crater which has basically Blofield's spy network.
It's
there.
A secret base, Bond villain base.
It's very Dr. No style, which is like everyone's very polite to. It actually had an incredibly 60s Bond feel.
I agree with that.
Entire
Absolutely,
scene.
True.
So Bond ends up blowing it up, of course, and then they all end up in London going to war with each other. So that's the conclusion. So
Moriarty is there.
Moriarty is
speaking about that later, but yes,
the NSA guy.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I was engaged the entire time. I was never bored by it, but I wasn't enthusiastic about the plot much.
That is exactly how I would describe it. Like, again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's a cookie cutter mold for Bond film, and so yeah, it's engaging enough, but it's never quite like thrilling in the sense that maybe a Bond movie should be. It moves along at a fine pace, and like you said, the A plot, B plot are all like very nicely cut out, and they connect to each other. It's all fine, but like you said, it wasn't terribly engaging.
I mean, I felt the same exact way about it. It was just your standard Bond plot. You know, there have been some films in the Bond canon that good word, which I was searching for, but which have done a much better job of, like, I guess, engaging me in terms of the plot. Like, this one was kind of, you know, it was just there.
Exactly. Here's the Bond plot, like,
and I thought everybody that was in it did, like, a fine job. I mean, I guess that's going to come into play with characters later, but the overall story didn't really. I mean, like you said, I wasn't bored, but I wasn't, like, fully engaged either.
I think one of the major problems with it is I'm thinking about, like, this is an action movie. So what are the action set pieces? The initial one was pretty good until the helicopter, as I mentioned earlier. But you had the second action set piece is James Bond's in a borrowed car because he's kind of dismissed.
He stole the car that was meant for 009 or whatever they say.
But none of the weapons were loaded, so you see him continually trying to use the stuff.
I thought that was a pretty good subversion, funny joke. But
and he's being chased by, I think, Jaws.
Forrest the Great. Yes.
No,
it definitely is him, and I'm going to say that later.
But like a way crappier Jaws.
I actually like this guy because he's unkillable in a sense, but never to the point where I felt that he artificially beat death.
Yeah.
It's always like he's like, oh, we just like bested him for this one moment.
Sure.
I don't even know if he's dead by the end of this. He kind of got thrown out of a train.
I was going to say, you got roped out of a train, so you. But still, sure.
So he's probably still wandering around the desert somewhere.
It's funny the world. Said, like, I absolutely got the Jaws feeling from him, but like a second-rate, cut-rate Jaws.
Yeah, but he's nails.
Yeah, all right.
He has these two silver thumbnails, which he uses to gouge people's eyes out.
Right,
so I guess he's the mountain Jaws.
Yeah.
So that action set piece wasn't bad, but nor was it like I've seen better ones
standard
before.
Bond like car chase.
The car chase was all right.
Then the next one was, for some reason, like, James Bond has to be the Red Baron in this. He's constantly in aerial vehicles causing ridiculous amounts of destruction. Like, so he's chasing, again, the Nails, who just kidnapped the Bond girl of this film.
Did that guy even have a name?
No.
I don't think they ever said it. I don't remember catching it.
They're in, his crew's in 3, SUVs, and James Bond's in a plane he stole from this...
comes out of nowhere in a biplane.
From the complex or whatever that he's chasing them through, sure, yeah.
And then he, goes to all these ridiculous lengths to stop them, including shearing off his wings and then running or, driving this plane
steering a plane
It became
somehow.
a sled at that point, essentially, yes.
And again, it was so absurd at points that it kind of disengaged me from the action. What was the next one after that?
Well, there's a fight when I'm trying to think. There was a fight before that in the complex where they abduct the girl.
Well, he goes
to
to
that
small
one.
Yeah.
He goes. I mean, so that's all. She's abducted.
They're on the train.
Q barely gets away from people.
I thought that was a much more interesting action scene.
I agree.
I was actually very invested in.
I like that they gave Q sort of a quick escape scene. Yeah, for sure.
And then he sends Q back to London, and he goes to find Mr. White,
that happened before. The reason he went there to see her is because
he had Heisenberg.
Oh no, that's right. So what happens after that? That's right. We didn't even talk about this.
They go they take the train to North Africa.
No, it's actually he finds Mr. White first. Oh no, that happens before the whole thing.
Finds Mr. White. Then they do the plane thing.
Yes.
Mr. White being the Pale King.
They do.
They go to his honeymoon abode or whatever it was.
Oh yeah, then they go
satellite photos. Then they have the train fight, the final fight with Nails. I thought it was actually well done.
It's fine,
because
it was a good fight scene.
Yeah,
well choreographed.
And the fact that James Bond really couldn't beat this guy, and it actually required the Bond girl to come in and basically save his ass.
Yeah, which I like. That's a nice touch as well. I agree with that.
So I don't know. I really actually did like that thing, and then I guess it goes to him being in the torture scene.
Yeah,
which was really kind of strange in a way.
It's all right.
What's so like? It's so strange. They just get off in the middle of nowhere, and then this Rolls Royce comes up through the middle of the desert, picks him up, takes him to this crazy
Takes him to the big mountain.
1980s pleasure palace in the middle of the desert.
No, but of course it's Blofield's plan all along.
Yeah.
But there was something I wanted to say. In the same sense that the opening helicopter thing was off-putting to you, the plane thing was more off-putting to me. Like, and even again, like, you know, it's hard to put my finger on it. Yeah, it's a standard Bond. Like, oh, you know, he's using a crazy vehicle and chasing vehicles. But the thing that broke me was when he crashed through one of the FUVs. And I was like, what if he crashed through the other one where she was in? Like, and I know you can say that about like a lot of Bond scenes like that.
No, but that was a Pierce Brosnan Bond scene.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
But like the Nails one, his fight in the train was very much a Daniel Craig style fight scene, and
that had its own
I think
flavor.
It was just down and dirty. It felt like the fight scene from Daredevil when he's in the hallway. You know, like it's that down and dirty. Like you feel every punch as it's going on.
I agree
that
with
type
that.
of
I just
thing.
wanted to mention that, but yeah.
When they get there, they end up escaping because Hugh slips him a watch. That
of course, the watch that's every Bond film.
Yeah.
I think it would have been more interesting if Blofeld had actually wiped out Bond's memories of everyone's faces, so he couldn't recognize anybody. The end of this, I mean, it's Daniel Craig's last movie. You might as well fucking go all out, you know?
Actually, that was a service to this film, because I really didn't know if Daniel Craig how long he would survive, especially since they really did a good job of establishing the Bond girl. I forget. Do you remember her name in this?
Madeline, I think.
Madeline, yeah. I think.
They established her as being a very capable and competent person, having most of the skills that Bond possesses. Her father was a criminal mastermind as well, actually from Quantum of Solace.
Yeah, he was former as part of Spectre.
Right.
Yeah. So I felt that they could have killed off like Daniel Craig towards the end and had her follow her throughout the rest of this, which I thought would be an interesting way of doing it. But again, they went with a standard cookie cutter.
Obviously.
Yeah. I also would have liked to see, so at the end, well, when they go back to London, like I guess right before the climax, I would say this is the part where the climax begins, right?
Well, when they get back to London, yes.
She.
And when he blows
I would say the climax. I guess that whole thing in the with the bomb is like all part of the climax.
Yes.
So
I'll talk about that. What I was going to talk about.
They end up like I guess like the scene where they're escaping. I really do believe the entire scene at what was it, Morocco, where they have the base in the crater.
Yeah,
the big empty.
I think so. Yeah,
it's in North Africa somewhere, so I think that's it.
Well, I mentioned earlier that it's Dr. No,
Tangiers.
but the entire thing was too with them escaping and having machine gun fights. And,
Absolutely,
and it really demonstrates Daniel Craig's more of a soldier in a way than a spy in a lot of this, and you see him being an excellent marksman.
Yes,
and very believable that he would be able to take out this squadron of mooks,
right?
Because he is better trained than them. Unlike Pierce Brosnan, for instance, who is like, "Oh, what's this pretty boy doing out? How's he surviving this?" So, yes, it's complicated, but it's a Bond movie. Of course, it's complicated. You're piecing together. I saw a lot of it coming along the way.
That's what I'm going to say about it.
And a lot of it was derivative of other Bond movies that came, but it kept. I never like wondering what time it was. I was never bored.
Yeah.
About any of it. I was just kind of like, oh, all right, let's see where this goes.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree. Like, it keeps you going along, but again, it never quite gets to like a level beyond that. It's hard to parse this one. I was going to give this one a 0 to start out with, my original impression of it. As you just described, yeah, it's all fine. There's nothing. Again, it's hard, I can't point my finger at any one specific thing and say this is why it didn't quite do it for me. It just maybe overall it fell a little flat, I guess, each time.
I don't think I think it faces the same problem that Quantum of Solace did. Aside from the opening scene of Quantum of Solace, I don't remember much about it.
Yeah,
same way.
It was pretty flat.
I'm going to forget this film pretty quickly, I think.
I might remember the intro to this one having in Mexico City because again it was very well shot.
Yeah.
But I had difficulty explaining what happened in the film when I was trying to describe it. Like, I just saw this a couple hours ago. Yeah. So it's going to have that it's going to just be with time be expounded. So
I agree with that.
Yeah, I think that's right. But anyway, that's about the body.
So
I'm going to give it a soft 1 because it was all right.
I'm going to give it a soft 0 for pretty much the same reason.
I think that I am going to give it a soft 1 as well.
All right.
It held my attention wasn't great, but it was
Sure.
it was fine.
Which brings us to the conclusion what I was speaking about. So I think I agree with you guys. Tell me if you disagree. That it starts off Act 3 / the climax starts when they leave. They blow up Big Mountain and go back to London to like recoup with the small with M and Q and Moneypenny, the small little band, and he faces off. Blofeld sets him up. I think it was an abandoned ship or something that was about to be. They set it up earlier in the beginning.
No, it's the old headquarters.
Okay, that's right.
M16.
Right.
It's where Q set up after they got taken over.
Okay, yeah.
Well, sorry,
Let me try to just describe it to you before you tell me about it. They figure out that the little team, while Bond has gone rogue, he's off the grid essentially. They can't really support him, so he comes back. They regroup in London, and he is led to the old headquarters, the old MI6 headquarters, where Blofeld has set up an elaborate trap, of course, and has hidden the girl, Madeline. Bond, of course, rescues her and just in the good time and escapes, and then Blofeld is escaping again in a helicopter. I don't know if it was lazy on their part or they're trying to call back to the beginning, but
they just rented a helicopter. They had to use it a bunch of times.
So another helicopter is dipping in and out of air. Bond shooting at it. It goes down. Blofeld's crawling out of it.
Bond breaks the helicopter with a handgun from 500 yards away.
Because he's Bond, man. He's fucking awesome, of course. So the helicopter goes down. Blofeld's crawling out of it. Bond meets up with him. The classic, finish it, do it, Bond. Bond ejects the clip from his gun, says, oops, out of bullets, and walks away, and he drives off at the very end with is it another stolen car that he bought? He just jacked 2 cars from Q in this movie?
No, I think he goes back and asks Q for his old car back, because that's the car that
it was okay.
He was I asked you earlier in the movie. Q says oh, here's your car from the last one. It's all in pieces. He's I asked you to bring it back in one piece, not to bring back one piece of it.
Yeah. So he drives off with Madeline, and of course it's implied sort of a send off to Daniel Craig's iteration of Bond, and I thought that was kind of weak. Again, cookie cutter ish, and you go ahead.
There's 2 points I want to make about that, and I really hate what they did with Madeline's character here, because up until that point she was a strong female supporting character, and then she decides to walk off because I can't get back to this, even though she was really enjoying. Running people gets captured. Obviously, and then it actually, weirdly enough, felt like the end of LA Confidential when they end up driving off together.
A bit. Again, I see what
Bud
you mean.
White and they said Daniel Craig and Daniel Craig's Bond and Bud White are basically the same character. So the only interesting part about this was that I think this is the first Bond movie where the bad guy got arrested, and not
I think we mentioned that too. We pointed that out. Yeah,
but Moriarty ends up having the most cliched Bond villain death of all time.
Yeah.
Fighting for the gun, he falls and dies.
By the way, I wanted to talk about that. So Moriarty is C in the film.
I think Andrew Scott is the actor's name,
all
but
right.
we kept calling him Moriarty because
his name's.
To be clear, he played Moriarty in the BBC Sherlock,
And he plays Moriarty.
And he also, he might as well be the same guy in this film.
That's what I was gonna say. Well, that's another thing we said. So he basically plays the same character of Moriarty in this film, and Christoph Waltz reminded me a lot of his character from Inglourious Basterds in this film.
Which I agree with as
and
well.
In both of those films, they were done better than this one was. But forgetting about that, there's a scene earlier where Ralph Fiennes is talking to C, Moriarty, about whether or not he's ever had to kill someone and all this stuff. And at the end, it's M against C, and he ends up just accidentally pushing him over a railing. M accidentally pushes C over a railing, and I was like, would this not have been a great time for him to look him in the eye and shoot him and prove his point from earlier? But that whole speech that he makes earlier in the movie makes no difference and is pointless.
Oh, to point out another cliche. At the very end of the movie, after Daniel Craig captures Blofeld, he looks to his left, and there's M standing on one end of the bridge. He looks to his right. There's the other M, Madeline, standing on the thing, and he just casually throws his gun.
Daniel Craig.
Here's a throwing the thing something away again.
Yep.
And
the casual toss away.
It's thank you, graduate of film school,
yeah,
for shooting this very like important scene of demonstrating the character. But I already knew this.
Yeah,
I already
get
knew
it.
that
Yeah,
like
sure.
you don't need to make this drawn out and painful to watch.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
I agree.
In the same way, again, if the helicopter thing was jarring, the ending was the point for me where I was like, you kind of just lost me a bit there.
Yeah,
And
Bond's
since
ending.
it was at the end, there was no chance for them to get me back.
Also, I don't think that Daniel Craig's Bond deserves
The
a
ending
good
to be
ending.
happy at the end.
I agree with
Well,
that for
here's
sure.
here's what I was going to bring up earlier, and then I was like, I'll wait till the conclusion. There's a point where Madeline says, "I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't do this.
Be in this
like,
life or something.
You are in this life. I cannot do this." And she walks away, and I was like, how good of a subversion would it be if just nothing bad happened to her and she just got to walk away? Like, as like Daniel Craig's last movie in his Bond, like, finally one of the Bond women, because at that point we were still under the impression that Blofeld was dead. I mean, I don't know if anybody actually believed it,
No,
but that was the impression that you were supposed to have.
That's what the characters were supposed to believe.
And
sure.
like, how good would it have been how good of a subversion would it have been if she just walked away and it was like, oh, now that he's dead, and like he just took credit for killing every single one of the women in your life for your entire career. If she was just, quote unquote, allowed to walk away from everything and she actually got away, like, that would have been, I would have loved that. And if she wasn't involved in the end of the movie, it would have been so much better, I thought.
No, well, if we're going theories, you want a better subversion? She becomes the next Bond as Bond walks away.
Well, I actually really thought that what they were going to do was, you expected Blofeld to be alive, but it was going to be her when you went in there.
I got that hint a little bit as well. Like, I could have seen it coming, but I want to discuss the implications for a second.
All right.
So M has been fired at this point, and MY6 is gone, and
The 00 program is discontinued.
So he just murdered the head with no proof of like this guy's involvement with Spectre.
The proof is that Bond told him so.
It's extra legal.
Yeah.
Quote unquote extra legal.
So I'm actually kind of hoping that they address this in the next one.
So
they absolutely will not, but they should.
M is gone. M is just gone.
Like, M is in prison next to Blofeld because like he just murdered. And remember,
they're talking to each other through the walls. Like,
the guy, like he murdered C or pushed C off a balcony. So and C had all of these politicians that he was not in his pocket, but friends with.
Ostensibly working with.
Like he went to school with so like M has done without any proof. M has done a lot of shady business here.
Yeah.
Sure.
And James Bond is now in a relationship with a girl he met a week ago. If
or so.
Oh, but they're in love though.
Yeah, they're in love.
Obviously.
And she happened to have brought up a lot of like different garments with her on this quick trip to Morocco.
No, she was given the dress, and that was a classic.
That
Bond
is
thing.
true. She was given the dress was laid down on the bed when she got there.
At
But
Big
what
Mountain.
about the green dress she
Right.
was wearing
And
on
the train?
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, she had a suitcase, man.
Yes, they're both very damaged people. One is a guy who is going to go insane and trying to build a normal life, and she is attracted to basically her father. So I don't think that they have a.
You're saying that's in the healthiest relationship in the world?
Oh, you're saying James Bond doesn't have a future with a Bond girl?
Yeah. So
It's weird.
So I feel this movie unknowingly just dooms all of the main characters' futures.
I hope
Because of the
next.
invocation?
I hope the next Bond movie begins with Daniel Craig and Madeline just dead, and like there's somebody taking over the 007 role. Idris Elba.
Be a good
If I had my
Doubt
choice,
it, but we'll see.
yeah, like him.
Yeah.
Idris Elba just standing over dead ass Daniel Craig and Madeline.
No, Daniel Craig, he's lost all his muscle, got fat. Like Madeline's pregnant with like has
Child number
kids
3.
now, and he's just sitting there, an alcoholic now.
He's drinking his vodka martinis.
No, with the pop off or something like that.
Well, that would be amusing.
They're
but
staying together for the kids.
I guess we'll wait and see. But to give the conclusion of this film a rating, I'm going to give it a 0.
I'm gonna also give it a 0.
I was initially actually coming out of the movie going to be kind to it, but after our conversation,
You should give it.
I'm enjoying a 0.
All right, Steve-O, now you are on to themes of this.
Are there any themes?
Yes. I will tell you one.
I mean, I know there are themes,
No,
but
sorry, I preempted your
let me
question.
finish my question.
All right.
Are there any themes that are different than any other Bond movie that has come before?
Yes.
Yes.
So, one of the main ones is like government oversight, right?
Yes.
Like the overstepping of government oversight. The 1984ization of British...
Wait. Are you suggesting that there's subtle, like, discussion?
Subtle?
No, they outright say George Orwell would be dying in grave or something like that.
Literally said one line, and this is like, George Orwell would not like this, or whatever it was.
No, we were beat over the head
Yes.
with that, dude. To the point
You
where
couldn't miss it if you wanted to. The theme of government surveillance is watching you through this movie.
this has made me less supportive of Edward Snowden because I just despise anyone now who's against government surveillance. And I don't want to hear about it anymore.
I'm done with that.
I was going to say, it's almost like the thing from The Martian where, like, government surveillance is awesome. See what happens when we don't have it? Like, so anyways.
All right, so you got that, which is the obvious one. And then you have, like, the standard Bond themes of whether or not he can sustain any kind of decent relationship with any human being, let alone a woman that he has to spend several hours with or days.
Well, to that point, though,
as the case may be.
This is why Skyfall was a superior movie, because it explored that concept really well with him and M, and the fact that M was his stable female, the motherly figure in his life. In this one, it just kind of it took all of that great character building and demolished it almost.
Threw it out the window.
Yeah.
They even have, right, so I'm going to tie it back to perhaps my favorite Bond film, Goldeneye, where they have a subpar line in this film about the line from Goldeneye is, I think Trevelyan says to him something very close to, "Tell me, James, have all the vodka martinis you drank silenced the screams of all the men you've killed, or have you found forgiveness in the arms of all the women for all the dead ones you failed to protect?" Like, that's such an awesome line. And, like, Blofeld sort of, like, again, has a line that's supposed to be that, but you're right, like, it
doesn't
falls,
quite live up,
yeah,
for
it doesn't
sure.
quite get there, and it kind of falls flat.
Well, I'll get to that when we get to dialogue,
Right.
but nonetheless.
Fair enough.
And back to conclusion for a second. Also, Blofeld is in prison, but his organization
Still exists, is out there.
is still
And controlling
like,
everything.
humongous.
Yes.
Yeah, there might be a small power vacuum now that he's gone, but he's got his small homies running.
Wait, so what did they say? Like when Bond crashes the thing, it's like they have some tens of thousands of women that like are
Yeah, they're
what do they say, like
slaves.
migrants or like misplaced
now
or
in
whatever,
the leisure business.
or now
Yeah,
in a leisure
that's
business.
exactly
Yeah,
what they say.
they clearly have a gigantic organization that one person going away from is not going to
Look,
be a problem
If,
for them.
if you've seen any Marvel like things lately,
No, they're
Hydra
Cobra.
is humongous, and just because you take out one person in Hydra, two more Blofelds will grow in its place.
Yes, exactly. That's why they have the octopus as their symbol, because they're in
Yeah,
tentacles
actually,
everywhere.
they're basically
Yeah, they're pretty much Hydra. I think they're exactly
They might as
Hydra.
well
Right? This might be the first crossover, actually.
Sure. So, any other themes?
I don't
This
know.
movie is not very deep,
I'm
say
guessing
that.
you guys have ideas, no? Or
again, I could beat the anti-surveillance. Like,
No, it beat you. in
I
this-
can tell you what I wish they would have concentrated on,
oh, please do.
which is Bond's like complete lack of human real human contact, and how it's slowly driving him to be like more and more suicidal throughout each one of these movies, and how it's also making him. He seems to be. I didn't see Skyfall. I saw Quantum of Solace. I don't remember much of it, but I remember liking Casino Royale very much.
That is,
and I think it's probably the best Daniel Craig
I
one,
probably agree with that. as
which
well.
completely mirrors Pierce Brosnan, but that's a whole other story. Where like his first one was the best for sure. But this idea that like I think in Casino Royale he was much more able to like form a relationship with people.
Well, that's
And then
probably
that was
his-
beaten out of him in Casino Royale, and then continued to
Yeah,
be
well,
beaten
that's-
out of him
that's
throughout
sort of
like the
this-
movies.
That's sort of this again Daniel Bond's arc.
And I wish they would have addressed that at any point.
But the thing is, I don't like. Again, if you're taking all four movies as a character arc, yes, it exists, but the ending is almost like
They didn't do much.
theoretically. There
The ending erases all of it.
Yeah, because the Skyfall isn't about Daniel Craig; it's about M. Like it's her send off to it. It's about her sins,
Sure.
and it's about slightly about Daniel Craig once again losing part of his humanity by losing M. You start to see it here where this could have gone, with
Yes.
him being less and less stable, and not only his relationships with people, but his relationships with M. He was there because of M. This new M doesn't have his respect.
And I think that's what they wanted to do with him going like rogue right in the beginning and like being cut off. I think that's what they wanted to do, but they did not address it.
Yeah, they let it trail off.
Which is terrible. It was like that's something they could have mined for like really good stuff.
Theoretically, this should have been his darkest movie.
Right.
This should have been him facing... In a sense, that's kind of what it is, because I'm going to say this. I really hated the twist that they were brothers. That was completely unnecessary. Yeah. That was too... Again,
I somewhat agree. You're right. It's completely unnecessary. Yeah.
They didn't use it right if they wanted to use that.
Bad scriptwriting. But here you have a character who's better than Bond intellectually, who has been the architect of a lot of the troubles in his life, and all of them. I don't know, but that's the thing is, he claims a lot, but I don't know how. Like, I could see him being a majority, but I think he would just add on other things that he knows about, saying, "Oh yeah, I was behind that too," which would be very interesting. This should have been a guy who is destroying what's left of Bond's world, and then Bond hitting his darkness in the following movie would have been his redemptive arc, and we got the conclusion without getting redemption.
Yes, that's well said.
Well, and that's what I was also going to say. Like, I don't see Blofeld as... Yes, he said that he did all that stuff, but I didn't see him as a really dark or, like, foreboding character. He just kind of was there for a little bit. Like, he didn't have enough on screen. And, like, I like the way that Waltz played him, but he didn't have enough meat to him to like make me scared of him, you know.
In a sense, he either should have been more of a Moriarty.
Right. That's exactly what I was going to say. He didn't pull off the Moriarty, even though he was trying to, or that they were trying to with that script.
And they had Moriarty.
Yeah, and Moriarty was in the film as a fucking lesser character.
Sure. Or they should have gone with the colder, like who was the Rupert Murdoch character from Sherlock as well. That kind of personality of just cold, logical. I'm better at this than you.
Right.
Or even to that point, if you wanted to have him have that relationship, be like Die Hard with a Vengeance, where you have a character there who is better than John McClane, but he's so driven by his desire for revenge that it screws him over. I don't feel Blofeld... I think that Blofeld got accidentally screwed at the end because Bond got a lucky shot.
Right. And you know what... that's the other thing, though. They didn't, in this movie, actually show him, like, besting Bond, really. They just referred to all the times that he was like, hey, let me tell you all the times in the past, like, before this encounter that I've gotten you. Like,
remember that better movie that could have been made?
I did that, yeah. Sure.
Exactly.
Well, you guys just spoke to antagonists, sort of, kind of, but let's rate themes before we move on to characters.
I think they were really obvious, and they weren't explored. The ones that they were trying to explore, they didn't really explore them all that well, and the ones that they didn't explore, I think, would have been more effective. So I'm going to give it a 0.
Right.
I wholeheartedly agree.
I pretty much do the same. I'm going to give it a 0. Yeah, sure. Thinking about government surveillance should be a good theme, but I already know that. Yeah. I don't need to be told.
Yeah, this is a little too. This is a little late for that.
Yeah, exactly.
And not only is it late, but it's way too on the nose. Like, I don't need to be bashed over the head with this in a Bond film. You can bash me over the head with, like, action and shit, all right? Like, I don't... Save that for...
I know the government's
Save that
me.
for, like, Black Mirror and, like, you know, that...
Speaking of...
Or even Sherlock.
This will quickly... It's funny you mentioned that. If you guys noticed, in addition to Moriarty being in this movie, the guy who played the Prime Minister in Black Mirror was also part of the little group. I just wanted to point that out.
What would have kind of been more interesting is if Bond had gone rogue and...
Had no support.
Had no support, and they were hunting him down through
as well,
the information system. As opposed to they kind of implied,
I think that would have been really cool.
Like they imply
again, they almost got there
briefly,
then they're like,
very briefly. He was like, "Well, we got Bond. See, this is a conversation. Anyway, let's never talk about this again."
Yeah, sure. Well, let's move on to antagonist. Ian, you just spoke a bit about Blofeld, so would you like to continue, explore further what you thought of him, if he is the antagonist?
Yeah, he is, but I don't know how effective he is.
Exactly.
I liked him as a character. I thought he was probably one of the more interesting, especially like towards the end when I feel it's almost wasted throughout all this.
I agree with that largely. Yes.
So Moriarty too was good, but again, I knew who this guy was as well. So going in, like when he appeared, I'm like, oh, he's a villain.
It's obvious. Yeah.
They were really. I think they were both really see-through.
Yes.
As far as villains go, and like that's not necessarily a terrible thing when it comes to Bond films.
But it just didn't. I don't know. It just didn't do. It just didn't get there. It wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they actually both did good acting jobs.
The thing is,
they're both good actors. Sure, we can of course agree with that.
I bought them more codename C.
Mm-hmm.
I believed his motivations. I didn't believe Blofield's motivations. And that's if I'm not buying into why a villain is doing what he's doing,
and he's not that effective. Sure.
Again, Skyfall this is the same revenge plot except it was against M. I totally believed all of Javier Bardem's why and the bad moves he pulled because he was so desirous of revenge. Le Chiffre from Casino Royale, he was desperate and that desperation was his downfall, but I understood his motivations throughout all. Blofeld started off as Steve Jobs.
Kind of. Yeah, it's funny.
I thought the only time that he was effective was when he was in the shadows, actually. I thought he was really good. That whole, he would turn his head, and then his assistant would come in. Like, he didn't have to say anything, his assistant would come over.
That was a good menacing shot.
This would have worked better. The Daniel Craig Bond series would have worked better as a television show than as a movie series. Because then you could have developed Blofeld over that time.
Yeah.
Blofeld didn't have...
I think he needed a reason to be menacing. Yeah, I think you're right. Like, he needed more... Not only did he need, like, probably a better backstory, but he also needed time to beat the shit out of Bond over and over and over again. And they just didn't have time in a movie to do that. Like, he should have just beaten Bond, and, like, Bond survives by pure luck, like, over and over and over again, I think. And then, like, at the end it comes down to it, and he's like, look, you see all these times that you barely got away? That was me letting you live. And, like, that's the most effective... That would be the most effective Bond villain.
They could have done that. Because they're saying that, all the other 3 movies? I was behind that.
That's what I was going to get.
But they never addressed that during the previous films.
And you know what they would have to not do with that is have him say it. It would have to be... that. I think that's... what was the least effective thing about it when he was like, I killed all those women. No, if Bond came to that realization in some other way, it would have been way, way more effective.
To give you an example of that within this movie, when he just showed the video footage of
M?
What's the chick?
The Pale King, Mr. White's.
Yeah,
death.
Mr. White's
yes.
To the Bond girl who, that's her father. And that's throwing that in her face of what James Bond is. That was a much more, like, he didn't speak, he just, you should watch this. You're
right. That was actually, that was probably one of the most effective things that he did in the entire movie.
It goes back to something you said as well, like, at the end, by the way, I was your brother, your adoptive brother, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's such a bullshit, like, what a twist. Not really, like, it in fact diminishes anything, and I agree with what you just said. He basically exposition dumps, like, he uses the leverage that the other 3 movies built up, like, oh yeah, all that shit, it was me. Like, that diminishes both him in this movie and all that other stuff too.
So let me ask you a question. I don't know if this exactly speaks to antagonists, but I'm not sure where I would fit it in this conversation, so I'm just going to ask you now because I'm thinking about it. Did you guys at any point think that Blofeld and Madeline were brother and sister? Because I did for like a period, and it was the juxtaposition of the photographs that they had.
Yeah, I get it, but I think he was more just messing with them each individually.
And
I thought she might have turned out to be Spectre.
So,
but
I thought that they were obviously saying that at one point, and then I realized that it wasn't the case, and I was like, "Wait, what? What the fuck?" And I don't know exactly. I would have to watch that part of the movie again and be like, to figure out why I thought that exactly.
No, I think.
But I was like, "What the fuck?" Like,
I guess I get it. But
why did you set it up like this? And then it turns out that they don't actually have anything to do with each other. And then he was like, "I was at your house one time," and she was like, "I don't remember that." And he was like, "But I do." And I was like, I don't understand what the point of that fucking conversation was.
Actually, I may be able to address that for you because you can tell me if you agree. When Bond tried to teach her how to shoot, she explains that when she was little, someone tried to kill her father, and it is implied that either she killed them or like fought them off.
Right.
And so I think that might have been him.
Yeah, but that's not.
I don't know if
that's not very effective.
Right.
Even if that.
I don't even know if that's even intended, but that's what I thought out of it. If they wanted that to be.
And then I just would say Nails. He was actually... I enjoyed his presence.
He was an alright dragon.
I would not call him an antagonist. I would call him supporting.
He was a dragon, so he's part of the antagonist. But that's not going to influence my vote either way. So.
Fair enough.
Well, what are you going to give Blofeld if we're agreeing he's the antagonist, which I think we are?
I'm going to give him a 0. I liked what Christoph Waltz did with it. I think he did as much as anyone could have done with that part.
Sure, probably more than most because he's Christoph Waltz. As we
It just wasn't a good antagonist. Like, I didn't give a shit.
I agree. I was wavering upon this one, but I think based on what we just said, I'll have to give him a 0. Even if it's soft, it just didn't do it. Just didn't get there.
We give it a 0 as well.
Now on to protagonist. Moriarty, of course, no. Like, it's Bond. So, aside from the conclusion, which we spoke about, Daniel Craig played him as well as he ever has, I think, based on the ones I've seen. Admittedly, I didn't see Skyfall, but I've seen the other ones. I've probably seen Casino Royale more times than the other ones, and he does a good job as Bond. He's charming, but he's also a little bit darker and brooding, definitely more reserved, if you will, than most. And yeah, maybe that speaks to the point they're like trying to maybe go for, where can't really have interactions, can't have relationships with people.
Right. I mean, I would agree. I think that he does a good job, and there were parts of this film where I was like, all right, why is this happening?
Yeah.
But I think more often than not, Daniel Craig did a good job of just being Bond. And like, he has played Bond pretty well throughout all of his films. And I think that this was no exception. I think that him as Bond was convincing, and I think he did a good job.
I'm going to rate Casino Royale is, I think, my favorite of his. Skyfall comes second. This will probably come third, and then Quantum of Solace will be
I think that's the way most people would rate it.
Yes. Again, I'm not going to disagree. He did a very good job. I enjoyed Daniel Craig.
He's a good Bond. And
I enjoyed him in Layer Cake back in the day.
Yeah.
I prefer to watch Layer Cake to this, but I think he did a good job here, so I'm going to give it a 1.
I agree. It's
Yeah,
hard to give him a 0.
There's
as
not
Bond.
much to say about Bond. Everybody, if you've seen a Daniel Craig Bond film, you know what he's going to be like, but
Precisely.
that's kind of what you want out of a Bond. Like, you have to go back a few Bonds to find a bad one.
I agree with that, so I think we're all giving him a 1. Bring us on to secondary characters, Mr. Ramosi.
I'm going to take up the mantle that you guys have been using and
stealing our ideas as always.
Talk about a secondary character or a supporting character that I really liked, and I can give all the credit to supporting characters for. I thought Q was good in this. I thought Q did a great job. I liked a few of the other supporting characters as well, but he was the standout for me. And I think that they did a good job of, like, because who was the guy that played Q in the Pierce Brosnan ones?
John Cleese, wasn't it still him?
Yeah. He was awesome. So they found somebody for this film. How has he been in all 4 of the Daniel Craig ones?
No, I think he appeared in Sky.
Either way, he does a good job.
He's a good younger,
and in this one he played a much larger role than Q usually plays, and I think he handled it really well.
Mm-hmm. That's fun. They did give Q more to do, if you will.
I liked Madeline, the Bond girl. I thought
Madeline did a good job too.
Perhaps 80% of the movie, a very strong female character that's complicated and actually makes sense why she's in this situation. Yeah, it's kind of forced that, you need to find my daughter. But, like, the way she's acting, she's not some naive
No, she's not
girl,
a helpless damsel in distress.
Yeah, right. In a bad situation. She's actually has lived around this for her entire life. So, yeah, I understand why she's shooting guns. She's not Denise Richards as a nuclear...
nuclear scientist or whatever.
Jones,
Christmas.
Or whatever.
Christmas only comes once a year.
Yeah, I remember that fucking line.
Everybody does.
Or even like Natasha from Goldeneye, which I know you guys both like. She is, in a sense, a helpless victim in this situation.
Right, that's true.
Where I felt that Madeline fit very well in. So I like strong female characters. And I thought that for the majority, maybe not towards the end when it all became bland. But she walked away. She's either turning into a villain or going to get captured and be like
the damsel in distress. But no, I agree with that too. Like I thought it's not a subversion, but she was definitely one of the strongest women he's ever teamed up with, and she clearly was capable, could handle herself. Like you said, her backstory was her father was part of Spectre and he broke away, and etc. But of course, my one is going to be Moriarty. He did a great job. Like again, sure, even though he might as well have been fucking playing Moriarty, but that means I liked his performance in it and his character.
He was perfectly smarmy.
Yeah, his character. He was just, the smarmy British dick. Then your time is done, old man. Now the new is the future essentially. And even Ralph Fiennes did a fine job as M himself.
I was just going to bring that up. Yeah, I thought that Ralph Fiennes kind of does a good job of returning to the original M.
Yeah, I agree with that.
He kind of has that same...
He brings a dignity to it in a sense.
And I love Judi Dench as M. For her role, I thought she had a very good send-off.
I agree with that too.
Skyfall. But at the end of Skyfall, like when Ralph Fiennes is introduced in the Skyfall, you're like, he's probably going to become M. And then it becomes M. So, I don't know. I think he does a very good job at it.
Fair enough. So I think that means we're giving the secondary / supporting characters a 1. I certainly am, at least.
I'm going to give it a 1 as well.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going to also give it a 1.
Alrighty. Alright, E, the dialogue in Spectre.
It was okay for the most part, but I have a major issue with it.
Mm-hmm.
This entire movie was kind of, in a sense, a love letter to previous James Bond movies. So
that's being generous. I have a different description, but I see what you mean.
They've kind of, like, again, I mentioned this before, like the Dr. No
feeling
for that one segment. I don't know, throughout, I always saw other Bond movies in here. And one of the problems is that they rephrased great lines that have appeared before in other Bond movies and the other movies have done it better. Yeah. My biggest complaint was during the big mount, the crater in
the crater base
in Morocco. Yeah, the crater base. Seeing Blofeld says to, "Why have you come here?" And James Bond goes, "To kill you." He's like, "Oh, I thought you came here to die." And he says it just as the guy in Goldfinger said it.
I expect you to die, Mr. Bond. Yes.
Like, what do you expect me to talk? No, I expect you to die. You just ruined it for me.
You fucking ruined it.
Right, you just said, "Oh, it's a leather." No, it's a fucking poor man's version of of trying to be an homage to that kind of stuff, and I fully agree with it. There are other lines too, like I said, I brought one up earlier, but
it's a love letter written by a teenager.
Yeah, exactly. It's fan fiction written by a subpar Ian Fleming fan. So I mean, I agree with that, and yeah, I think that's the way we just restated it is better dialogue than some of the dialogue in the film itself. So that's pretty much that's my feelings on it. Got anything there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add. It was mostly forgettable, and sometimes I don't think I really cringed at any point, but it was mostly forgettable and just not very good.
I sighed at points. Though.
It was fine. Yeah, I might have sighed.
I felt let down by it a lot.
You know what? I laughed at I thought there were points that were funny in not dialogue, but the things that you expect, and then them coming to terms in like.
I have a major rant coming on right now because I just remembered about
it. All right. Okay. Let's hear it.
So one of the great things about I love James Bond movies. I think I've seen about more than half of the entire, and there's how many 40 movies or something like that.
Yes.
One of the great parts is cheesy or not. A lot of the dialogue has those double entendres. And the kind of sexual undertones.
They're Bond one-liners. There's a trope named for it.
So there's a fantastic setup to what would have been a brilliant old school Bond line in here. C, when he's challenging M. So C goes like, "Oh, that's what M stands for.
Oh,
moron, gun."
Yep.
And like fires, and the gun's empty because M took out the bullets. So he goes, "Oh, now we know what C stands for."
And what did you think he was going to say?
End scene.
And cut. No need.
Go away.
And then he goes, "Careless." And that is an American screenwriter.
You're right.
Having watched previously, like, "Oh, I can write a Bond double entendre." But no, we got to make this family friendly and say, "Careless."
You're exactly right about that. And I'm glad, like, I was going to go on a similar rant or just say the broad thing where they wasted so many opportunities. Like, there wasn't even many Bond one-liners in this, and the ones I had fell so flat and didn't live up. Again, poor man's fan fiction.
See, this thing, half of the audience laughed at that C line. Oh, now you know it's
before he said careless. Yeah.
Exactly, and that was one of
those.
And
then it was silent after that. So
you're right.
Just everybody being pissed off that they said careless.
They're like, I can't believe they continued it. Why did they have that extra one? It would have been great if they just the sentence ended and that's the joke. That's what you needed to say.
But that is a perfect. That's what makes Bond wonderful. Those kind of lines, and
you're right. They just weren't. They just didn't do it in this one.
That's getting a big, fat, well-deserved 0 just for that.
I agree with that.
I'm gonna go 0. I would have gone 0 before that, but it's a hard 0 now.
It's a shake and end stir 0.
Yeah,
agreed.
It's one of those zeros that line.
Make it a double 0, if you will. Double O. Sure. All right. So we're on to style, and I will say, like, again, it goes back to what I said. I'm judging it as a Bond film, and the action scenes did have style to them, and I think it was shot, aside from the thing you mentioned at the end, like, where he's looking one way and the other on the bridge, like, yeah, I get it, thanks, film, I understand. But there's nothing wrong with it. Again, it's all shot for, like, the chase scenes with the car, that was fine, copter scenes, the fighting scenes, the train brawl was great. So I think it had, if nothing else, it did have a sense of its own style and pulled it off well.
Bond films almost get an automatic one.
Yeah, see,
in style.
that's what I'm saying. That's kind
like
of the thing.
it's all you have to do is play the music, and I'm like, all right, I'm into this action scene.
That's
Like
true.
and like it starts off with like a style point that is just built into it.
It's always
like
gonna be cool, yeah.
when Bond walks on the screen and shoots the camera, like I mentioned earlier, that's always fucking awesome. That being said, I think that they did a good job with like the cinematography in this.
Especially the opening scene. Whoever did the cinematography deserves.
I agree with that.
A good
It
job.
was a
Right.
really memorable
Something
one.
else.
This is probably the most memorable
Pat
thing.
on the back and an attaboy, you know, like yeah. I mean, I thought it was all well done. Like there were some really cool long shots of like locations and things like that. Like one of the shots that I really liked was the scene where when they get off the train in the middle of the desert, and it pans back, and then the train just leaves. And it's just them standing there with all their luggage. It kind of reminded me of like a Wes Anderson shot or something like that. So there are a bunch of really cool shots in this. I think the style is pretty well done.
I think, like I said, it's hard to fuck up style in a Bond film. It'd be a task unto itself.
Also, whoever was the one who picked out the locations did a fantastic job.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
They
Oh, yeah.
were beautiful. And again, the cinematography was great for this. It just... If that was what we were focusing on, cinematography, this would get a very good score.
Sure.
Right.
Like this entire movie would have. But we focus on narrative.
The places where the characters were awesome,
Yeah.
but the characters themselves. Like I said, like it's hard to give Bond himself a 0, so it's hard to give the style in a Bond film a 0.
But I think
as well.
I think it is important to
Sure.
add this to the discussion because the overall aesthetic of a film, style wise, kind of adds to the narrative in a way. So I'm glad that we have this in here.
It can
As-
accentuate
as-
it.
I
suppose.
didn't feel any location in this was aside from the first one,
too
an
far-fetched.
action set piece for the sake of an action set
Right,
piece.
right.
They all felt
That's well said.
natural in why they're there, and it felt like a globe-trotting adventure.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
And
100%.
even when they were in London, him going through the wreckage,
The derelict buildings,
derelict at MI6, that was a very interesting location that they built up.
Yeah. And it's cool because it was a reimagining of a location that they'd already been through. So you took this thing that you had already seen and it completely, they completely redid it to be rigged as just a gigantic bomb, basically. All the lines running everywhere in it, and like that's kind of the way that you rig a building to implode on itself and just like take it down.
It was realistic,
So,
but still cool. So,
pretty interesting.
anything else on style, fellas? I believe we're giving it a 1. Yes.
Yes.
I'm gonna give it a 1. Yeah.
Alrighty. Brings us to the final. Steve-O, your recommendation of Spectre and your overall impression of it.
So, my first impression at the end of this film, and probably the one that's going to stick with me the most, is that this is just a mediocre Bond film. I think that every Bond has 1 or 2 really good films in them.
I mean, every actor who goes through a cycle playing Bond.
For each Bond that there is, I think there's 1 or 2 good ones, and this was not one of Daniel Craig's best.
Wasn't the strongest one.
So I would say there are plenty of other Bond films out there that you can go see that will be better than this one. In that sense, I can't really recommend it. If you want to see the ultimate finale of Daniel Craig's run, then check it out. But you're much better off.
Nah, just see Casino Royale.
You're much better off going to watch Casino Royale, or going back and watching Goldeneye, or going back and watching Goldfinger, like any of Sean Connery's movies.
So, again, I've seen a lot of Bond films. This is interesting because it's the last of the Daniel Craig ones. You really don't need to see this to watch the next Bond.
Exactly.
Right.
And in fact, Daniel Craig, I feel, was one of the few Bonds that it really connected. All of the movies were really connected to each other. So if you're watching all of the Bond movies, you don't need my recommendation. You're going to watch
You're
this
going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
If you're looking to hey, I'll check out a Bond film, this is not the one you start with. First of all, narrative-wise, you need to see at least 1, if not 2, of the prior Daniel Craig ones to really appreciate what little narrative is here. And if you just want an action adventure, you already said it. Watch any Sean Connery. I love Timothy Dalton. I think he did great ones.
Yeah.
There's some even good Roger Moore ones. There's
Watch Moonraker, baby.
Yeah, there's that one random one that I can't think of the guy's name. Or you can watch the Sean Connery one that was later this and not recognized as one of the main
That's right.
Or if Daniel Craig, watch Casino Royale, which is the best one he did, and I think actually
one of the top Bond movies.
Yes.
I think. Yeah, that movie was incredible, and that got me really excited about Daniel Craig as Bond. and then I was kind of let down by Quantum Solace, and then etc.
But Skyfall kind of is what this one intended to be and failed to live up to. So watch Casino Royale and Skyfall, and you've gotten everything you need out of the Daniel Craig thing.
There you go.
I pretty much agree. I would say the same thing. Someone said to me, amongst the ones even of his body of work, which one do you recommend? Not this one. And I would recommend other Bond films beyond that. It fell flat in the canon of all Bond films ever made, and even amongst the block that Craig played Bond for. So I cannot give it a recommendation.
All right, so it's zeros all around.
You guys cannot either.
That.
All right, so that brings us to final scores. I gave it a 4. Steve-O, you gave it a 5, and Ian, you also gave it a 4. So that is
4.33333
repeating. Which, yes, sorry to say, the send off of Daniel Craig's run is just pretty much lackluster.
It's mediocre. I think maybe it deserves better than a 4.3, but not much better.
I know
it's approaching a 5, and I think it's like a middle of the road movie, even for Bond.
I think it's slightly less than average. But are there worse Bond films?
Absolutely.
But there are
many other better
probably
ones.
How many movies have there been in the franchise?
There's probably like 30.
27, I think, maybe the
so
number.
I would say that this is on the bottom
it's
half.
In the bottom, I'd say.
Right. I would agree.
And that's where a 4.33. It's not the bottom, but it's...
Well, I want to see the Bond film that gets a 1. No, I don't. I don't want to see the Bond film.
You probably have, but yeah. But
yeah, I've probably already
I agree.
seen
The Spectre of Spectre haunts it with mediocrity. So I think that'll do it, fellas. We will see you next time.
All right. Have a good one.
This has been Bond MOTS. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Music by Chris Morgan.
Editing and engineering by Scott Thurlow.
This has been a Los Angeles production. All rights reserved.